Now we briefly have to revisit the madness of, yes, the COVID vaccines. Look, a few weeks ago I posted a video about this Wall Street Journal article talking about the deceptive campaign for bivalent COVID boosters. That video went on to get over 900,000 views in a matter of just 2 weeks, knocking on the door now of 1 million views on a video. And that's because this particular piece by an editorial board member of the Wall Street Journal goes as far as calling the bivalent COVID booster advertising campaign as basically deceptive advertising, alleging that the CDC and the FDA basically pre-approved the bivalent COVID vaccines before actually having the appropriate studies. In fact, they suggest that the studies by Pfizer and other companies like Moderna were essentially timed and engineered to purposefully make the results seem more desirable and make the studies seem more efficacious to convince or manipulate the CDC and the FDA to approve the bivalent COVID vaccines before they were actually studied as both, quote, safe and effective. Now, we'll talk about safe in just a moment, but regarding efficacy, it's worth noting that only after the FDA and the CDC approved the bivalent COVID boosters, the CDC posted a study in November, which was already well into sort of flu season, if you will, revealing that the bivalent boosters were basically only 22 to 43% effective against the BA.5 wave at their peak efficiency. However, that efficiency dropped to nearly zero within just a few weeks of taking these vaccines, these boosters. And usually, a vaccine is only deemed efficient if it is 55 to 70% efficacious. But unfortunately, it seems most of these boosters were actually found to be nominally effective, that is 23 to 43% in the CDC's own studies, which is a slap in the face to the fact that they basically pre-approved these vaccines. And because of this sort of campaign of everybody needs to get boosters, they didn't sort of want to lose credibility and U-turn, despite the fact that the facts revealed these boosters were not effective. And so this particular coverage of this piece went pretty far. Now, part of the reason I think this video did quite well is because we were also able to find plenty of information and studies from the medical community suggesting that maybe one of the reasons boosters for COVID just aren't that effective is because of this biological phenomenon known as immune imprinting, where basically your body, every time it sees a new booster, it just creates more antibodies to the original strain and not the boosted strain. And so this video did quite well, and it really shared sort of some light into this, the way the pharma industry is really perpetuating this idea that, oh, everybody should just continue to get boosters and shots and boosters and shots and boosters and shots, despite the fact that biological science suggests no, that's probably not actually the best, especially when these new boosters aren't even necessarily effective. But now we have new, this new letter out, which is really interesting. This is actually from the Health Freedom Defense Fund. Now, I always like to start with any kind of bias from a company. It's worth noting that this, I believe, is set up as a nonprofit. But anyway, it's an organization that fights for the freedom to choose, sort of biological autonomy, they call it. They've actually won lawsuits against the CDC and the Biden administration, forcing the end to certain mask and vaccine mandates. One of the things that's worth remembering is that there was this massive, during the COVID era, dare I say, vilification campaign of, anti-vaxxers, right? Like, oh, you're basically, the mainstream media narrative was always, oh, if you're anti-vax, you're an idiot, right? And now what you're finding more and more is that, wait a minute, why are we potentially seeing increases of heart attacks in individuals who are of younger age, and especially younger males? You're especially seeing that amongst 20, 21-year-old males as a median age of individuals who generally don't have heart problems or myocarditis or heart attacks or whatever, and you're suddenly seeing an increase in that. And this is why one of the trending things we've been seeing has been the quote or trend sudden death on Twitter, because why all of a sudden are younger people dying more? Why are there more excess deaths? Now, we'll look at what CBS News has to say about that in a moment, which, gives you sort of the other side of the narrative, which does make you raise your eyebrows a little bit in terms of, wait a minute, what is happening in mainstream media? Hey, by the way, if you're looking for ways to build your financial freedom, check out the programs on Building Your Wealth linked down below. They're the only sponsor of the channel, and there are many programs from becoming a millionaire in real estate from zero to millionaire real estate investing course, stocks and the psychology of money, increasing your income at your job, or if you're self-employed, starting a business and growing that business, check all of that out, linked down below. But at least the Health Freedom Defense Fund, they're suggesting that, look, hey, when we realized that people were getting concussions in the NFL and brain injuries, we acted to try to make sure we have more protective protocols. Well, now it's time for the NFL to potentially start looking into COVID-19 vaccines, especially after the increase in cardiac arrests, heart attacks, and strokes among NFL players. And of course, the Health Freedom Fund puts together a set of multiple different research suggesting that, hey, we're starting to see more cardiac-related mortality following COVID-19 vaccines, seeing potentially rare but fatal thrombosis, higher frequencies of myocarditis in males with a median age of 21. And they link to a lot of their research and information, which of course we could sort of independently go through. But basically this fund is now calling on the NFL to make sure that they no longer downplay the effects of myocarditis and actually potentially start screening NFL players and younger males for the potential evidence that maybe many more people have myocarditis than we actually are aware of. And an interesting thing is that myocarditis, at least according to this piece, has always been deemed dangerous and a serious health concern until the COVID-19 vaccines. Now, all of a sudden, the narrative is to actually downplay how important myocarditis is. And then it makes you wonder, like, my goodness, how much money is being thrown at downplaying something that used to be deemed serious and is now being downplayed because it happens to potentially be a side effect of the COVID-19 vaccines, which is quite interesting, especially since heart attacks are substantially up in younger males. Now, we'll see that actually corroborated by the mainstream media, but their counter argument is a little bit of an eyebrow raiser, which I'll play here in just a moment. But anyway, this particular organization here is calling on the NFL to realize that, look, initially they were part of increasing vaccine uptake, but now it's time to maybe realize maybe that wasn't the best of ideas. And maybe we need to start screening people who have been vaccinated for myocarditis, even if they don't yet have symptoms, to potentially prevent more damage in the future, or more accidents or deaths in the future. But anyway, here's a piece from CBS News where, take a listen to some of the statistics that they provide, and then, we'll add some more commentary. So let's go.
Across all age groups since the start of the coronavirus pandemic.
But a recent study found that young people are actually most at risk in this case. According to Cedars-Sinai Hospital, the number of heart attack deaths among 25 to 44-year-olds in the U.S. over the first 2 years of the pandemic was 30% higher than predicted. Dr. Celine Gounder is here on set with us to talk more about it. She's editor-at-large for public health at Kaiser Health News, and she is also an infectious disease specialist and epidemiologist and a CBS News medical contributor. Dr. Gounder, thank you for being here. What stood out to you in this study?
I think the fact that you're seeing such a big increase specifically in the youngest age group, so the 25 to 44-year-olds, you saw this 30% increase in the risk of death from heart attack. And that really is quite striking. That's not a group, an age group in which you normally see heart attacks, much less dying from a heart attack.
So to do a study like this, you look at the years prior to the pandemic and the typical rate of heart attack death in that age group, and then you see it increase and you wonder what's the new variable. And so the pandemic is that new variable.
So just keep in mind really quickly what we're learning here, right? CBS News is saying, look, hey, all of a sudden after the pandemic, a lot more young people are having heart attacks. And obviously, there is a plethora of research suggesting, well, maybe it's because of myocarditis. Now, it'll probably still be years before we have official and finalize data and evidence that, yeah, you know what, it's definitely the vaccines that are doing it, but right now it kind of looks like it's the vaccines that are leading to an increase in myocarditis, especially since research that we're finding suggests, wait a minute, people who just get COVID naturally and not the vaccine aren't seeing an increase in myocarditis. Now, mainstream media so far has taken the stance that, yes, we are indeed seeing an increase in sudden death and heart attacks. But now, listen to what they think the cause is. And it's just interesting because while I don't want to make any conclusions here, I want you to be aware of both sides of the narrative. One side says it's definitely the vaccines. Now, you're going to hear the mainstream media response to what's actually leading to more heart attacks and sudden death.
That's right. So these researchers looked at 10 years of data across the U.S., all the death certificates that get filed with the CDC, that data. And so what they saw is prior to the pandemic, heart attack deaths were actually dropping. And then that trend reverses and you see those deaths go up, especially among that youngest age group during the pandemic.
And do we know why why younger people might be more at risk, or?
We don't know for sure. And in fact, these death certificates are probably not even capturing the fact that they might have had COVID. They're really just saying, did you die from a heart attack or not? What we do know, however, is that younger people were less likely to protect themselves against COVID than older people, less likely to mask, less likely to take other mitigation measures. And they were also farther back in line to get vaccinated. So they were not protected with vaccination until later in the pandemic. Those might have been a factor here.
Wait a minute. Listen to the argument that she just made. The argument she just made is maybe younger people are dropping dead of heart attacks more because they had to wait longer to get vaccines and were less likely to wear masks. So in other words, this person's narrative is, if you didn't wear a mask and you ended up getting COVID, now you're more likely to die of a heart attack. When the statistics that we're seeing so far, the research we're seeing so far is that, wait a minute, the vaccines maybe aren't actually safe and effective. When we actually think about the biological fact that the proteins that are injected into you from these vaccines that go directly to your heart could lead to inflammation in your heart. So we know that the vaccines lead to an inflammation in your heart and potentially myocarditis. But no, if you didn't wear a mask, now you're at a higher likelihood of dropping dead from a heart attack. That's a really stretchy argument there, and I don't buy it. Now, I'm not trying to be tinfoil hat, but I think you can make your own conclusion here, and there's more research to be done. We'll keep providing value on it. But just think for a moment about the two narratives, okay? One narrative, well, first of all, both sides agree more young people are dying of heart attacks and are dropping dead after the pandemic. One side is saying it's the vaccines because biologically we could see myocarditis can happen within days of getting a shot, and the incidence of myocarditis spikes within about 2 weeks of getting a shot, a vaccine. And the other side is saying, well, maybe more people are dying of heart attacks because they got COVID and they didn't wear masks and they're younger and they had to wait longer to get the vaccines. So maybe had they been able to get the vaccine sooner, they wouldn't have actually myocarditis, which it just seems like the craziest anecdote and unfounded in research. But whatever. Those are the arguments. It seems wild. I really want to know what you think about it all. So leave me a comment and let me know what you think. But I want to give a shout out here to an individual who left a comment. I was fired from my job for not getting the vaccine, forced to sell my house, wasn't able to eat out at restaurants for 2 years, wasn't able to take a train, plane, or ferry for 2 years. I was called a misogynist and a racist by the prime minister for my choices. Wow, that's unfortunate. I'm sorry I had to go through that. That's crazy. But anyway, I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to let y'all make your own decision, because if I make too many conclusions, I'm going to end up getting banned from YouTube.